Steve, I'd like to know when you actually felt like, oh, I've got this. I can do this, and this is what I love to do. I mean, you start out with an ambition with wanting to be able to write lyric-like verse, but when did you really feel like you had a handle on it?
Do you mean when did he feel like he was a poet?
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
It took a few years. About 1980, 1980, my mother had passed away, and that was right around the same time I really started writing more. Previously, I'd write here and there, and I didn't even call myself a poet. I used to say I'm a writer, but I didn't use the word poet. And I reconnected with some of my cousins that I hadn't seen after my mom's funeral. And my cousin Kathy found out that I wrote poetry. And she wanted to read it. And she did. And she said, you know, your poetry's good, she's here, but you're so serious all the time. She's here, you need to inject some humor into your poems. And then I don't know if she had given me the book. She may have, but somehow I came across a book of Ogden Nash, and that's when I thought, okay, you can put humor in poetry. Because when she first told me that, I couldn't say it. I'm like, really? You want me to write funny poems?
That's very ironic that you at first had would be considered a too serious poet, because in later years you were considered a humorous poet to an extent beyond which you really didn't want to be considered the humorous poet. So it sort of turned around on you and backfired to an extent. But humor is still pretty good, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, it is. And I started using it, but, you know, at that point I hadn't been out to poetry readings yet.
Oh, yes.
And then around 1981 was when I met Emiliano, and that's when I started going to readings, and that's when I started hearing other poets use humor. And over a period of time, I started using it a little more. And it's like anything else, if you do it enough, you kind of start to get halfway decent at it. And as you say, it actually became ironic in the end. But once I joined the Northeast Regional, once I was reading for Emiliano 2 Saturdays a month, which adds up to quite a bit.
Gives you plenty of practice.
And then I met Mad Poets, and I just started getting deeper and deeper into it. And at some point, I started calling myself a poet instead of a writer. I mean, I guess it's.
You don't remember when that happened? There wasn't a moment?
There wasn't a moment, you know, there was no clear epiphany of it. But at some point it happened, and then I just, you know, going to all these poetry readings and meeting all these poets and talking about it and being inspired. And it's kind of like there's an Al Stewart song that says you never see the change from day to day. And that's kind of what happened. Right. I didn't see the changes from day to day or even year to year. It's just one day I woke up and I'm part of a poetry circle.
I didn't meet you until 1990. Now, I would have assumed that you already considered yourself a poet by that time.
Probably by that time, yeah.
Because I certainly did. At that point, you and Bob Forster were running the Northeast Regional program. And I remember when I came there and you seemed to like my poetry, and I thought, oh, that was a great reward for me, because I figured, well, here these guys are actual poets, and they think that I can be a poet, and I thought that gave me at least a chance to legitimize myself eventually And I'm not sure when exactly it happened for me either, but as you say, it's a gradual, it's kind of an evolution. Also, seeing your performance really inspired me. I didn't really know what performance poetry was until I saw you up on the stage at the Northeast Regional.
Well, I always credit Emiliano for that. That's a debt to him that I'll never be able to repay.
Really?
Because I would stand there and I would just read my poem
All right.
and it was
That's what I thought
Emiliano
it
that
was,
says, you know, get your face out of the paper, look at the people, you know, live the poem. That was the line that stuck with me, live the poem. And again, it didn't happen overnight, but eventually I did start to live the poems, and more I would get compliments on my performances, which certainly keeps you forging
It does.
ahead.
It does. There's nothing like a little encouragement. Call
Yeah.
it flattery if you will, but it's,
A
encouragement.
little pat on the ego is
Yeah.
fine.
I owe you the same debt as you owe Emiliano, because seeing you perform was what informed me as far as what could be done with the poetry that's already on the page. What are you going for when you're performing? What kind of a reaction do you really like to get?
Whatever the poem is supposed to bring about. I mean, humor is easy, you know, you're going for laughs, and humor works great. If they laugh, you know you've succeeded, and if they don't, you know you fail.
Right, so it's clear.
Everything else past humor is different. Unless you get some oohs and ahs, but sometimes an audience won't clap just because it doesn't mean they don't like what you're doing. They just may not clap to the end. Or sometimes you might read a few poems during a feature and not really get any applause, and then for some reason they'll applaud a certain poem, and you might embrace that particular poem, but you also may think everything else you read wasn't really that good or connecting.
So it's all relative.
So you kind of really don't know. Every time you get up to read, I think there's a certain amount of risk involved, except for maybe a handful of tried and true poems.
Even those, sometimes you get a surprising reaction.
Yes.
I also wanted to ask you about poems that you've read that didn't get the reaction that you were expecting. Maybe got a worse or even a better reaction than you expected. That the audience surprised you.
There's a poem that it was supposed to be a serious poem, and I was reading it and I was getting laughs right from the outset of the poem. And I did throw in a little sort of dark joke at the end, thinking the poem needed some levity because it was so dark and serious, but everybody had been
Laughing already.
Laughing, and I thought, oh my God, this is not working at all.
But they were probably enjoying it.
I guess, but I'll read the poem.
Oh, would you like-
Okay, the poem is called Artistic Turmoil, and it starts with an epigram. Hi, Roger. It starts with an epigram by Graham Greene, who says, "There is a splinter of ice in the heart of the writer. I have no ritual or ceremony, no candles, no pentagram. I don't dress in long black robes or chant, conjure up ghostly manifestations to exorcise my demons. I am not a shaman, a medium, or a high priestess. My turmoil surfaces naturally, uncontrollably, as sacrifice of words, with hopefully some meter and not too much inspiration from Sylvia Plath." So,
Okay.
again, the last two lines are the little dark joke that I felt the poem needed, but at that point it didn't need it at all, because for some reason the audience found this humorous.
I think a lot of it depends on the mood of the audience coming in. You know, do you think they were expecting you to be humorous and they were kind of geared up for that?
That could be, you know, me carrying that kind of reputation or sometimes burden on my back that maybe they expected something humorous.
Yeah, have you read this other times and gotten the same reaction? Or
Haven't read it since.
No.
This is the first time, so I'm not reading this anymore. Now I've read it on YouTube for everybody to hear it.
Well, it's interesting that it's called Artistic Turmoil and it bothers you so much.
I even prefaced it. I remember saying that I was watching an interview with Paul McCartney, and they were asking him about the whole kind of suffering for art thing. And he said, well, I hate to think that. He said, but I do think there's something to it. So, you know, I mean, that was a serious question. He gave a serious answer. I had a serious response, but...
And it took a turn.
It took a turn, yeah. There's nothing I can do about that. I just read them.